Hello and welcome to another Inside the Birds TV with Adam Caplan and Geoff Mosher, presented, of course, by DraftKings Sportsbook. As the Eagles prepare to face the Panthers on Sunday, they're 1-3, and they've given up 40 or more points in 2 straight games. So we felt we needed a defensive expert to come on and break down the breakdowns for us. So, of course, we bring in our own from the Inside the Birds family, former Eagles safety, Quintin Mikell. You can hear the Q&A show with Quintin Mikell and Jason Avant on the Inside the Birds platform. Their show drops every Thursday at 6 a.m. Q, I know you and Jason did get into the entire team. You talked about the defense in the latest episode, but we wanted to bring you back on just to go, get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on. And the first question, because it's been kind of talked about a lot this week, and Jonathan Gannon was, I guess, the best defense that he's shown was at the podium this week when he's kind of talking about his defense and and being very emphatic that his players are being put in the best position to succeed for what he's trying to do. It's just that he, quote unquote, has to do a better job. So you've seen this defense for a couple of weeks now. Does the personnel in your mind fit what he is doing schematically?
No, and I would say I think that the scheme schematically, in theory, can work, but to me, it's the biggest issue is the players aren't there yet, and we've talked about it before, but especially the linebacker play, it's got to be better. Those guys have got to be more aggressive versus the run. They've got to be better in coverage, and it's got to be a situation where it's either you can't really sit back in the zone and try to take everything away. You're never going to do that, right? So you got to pick and choose. You got to say, listen, we're either going to stop the run and force them to throw the ball, or we're going to play aggressive and blitz and get after them, or we're just going to play man. And I mean more predominantly during the game. And it seems like we're not doing any of those things well. And so I think a little bit of scheme, but I also think that it's a little bit of personnel in the sense of those guys have got to get better in the middle of the defense.
Q, on that subject, just from what you've observed, are they buying in? Because there's been so many mental errors the last two games. I look at it and go, what? Geoff and I didn't play, so it's hard for us to answer this. But you, from being a former player and watching the games, do you think they're buying in?
I think they're still trying. I think so. Like, to me, the biggest indicator if a team isn't buying in, for me personally, like I'll watch the players. I'll watch them in between plays. I'll watch them pre-snap, post-snap, when something good happens, when something bad happens, and that's, for me, generally speak, like I can generally tell if a team is really buying in and focusing in. And I think it's a little bit. I think early on in the season, and I think early on in games, they're buying in. And I think as the game progresses and things kind of get out of hand, you start to see that frustration. So I still think that they're trying, but I think there's really a sense of urgency. And I do really feel that it's starting to get to the players that they are not in the position to be successful. And, like one of the biggest indicators for me is after a play, you got, a blown coverage or a missed tackle or anything bad that happens, and you see guys kind of throwing their arms up and like looking at each other or looking to the sidelines. To me, that's an indicator late in the games that they're starting to get frustrated and starting to lose hope.
All right, well, let's ask you about certain players then in that regard. First, I'll tell everyone to download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the promo code ITB. That's promo code ITB using the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app. So, Q, if you were Jonathan Gannon and you've seen the last 2 weeks, you know that Jeremiah Trotter's not walking through that door, and neither is a 330-pound nose tackle to eat up some of those double teams. So, what can Jonathan Gannon do with his current set of personnel to be better against the run?
Well, I think two things. Yeah, in general, I think, 2 things need to happen. There needs to be a little bit more line movement, maybe using some stunts, twists, even if you got to go like the old school, just slants. There's got to be more line movement to really kind of force the offense's hand into, kind of where you want to run, where you want them to run. We can't sit back in the 2 deep zone all game. You've got to bring a safety in the box. Rodney McLeod, he's a little bit older. It was his first game back, but he's still got a lot of potential. He's still got a lot of ability, and he's a vet, and he kind of knows the game. He knows where he's supposed to be, and I think you got to give them the opportunity. That secondary, these players, you got Nelson, you got Slay. Give them the opportunity to make plays. You can't really make plays if you're just sitting in the zone. It's almost kind of the same thing with the offensive game plan, in the sense of, if you're just sitting back and pass block an entire game, and you got defensive ends and D tackles just pounding and teeing off on you all day, it's for a long day. So it's kind of the same thing, but flipped on defense, where if you're just sitting in the zone all day and guys are just finding the open zones and you got no pressure, it just makes it for a frustrating and a hard day. So, give those guys the tools and let them cut them loose. Like, let them play man, let them blitz, let them get after the quarterback. Just show something that the offense has to worry about. Right now, they're not worrying about anything.
Well, week one, here's the thing that's interesting about what you're talking about. In week one, it seemed like they were doing some stuff. Obviously, they got pressure. Matt Ryan hauled on the football. But the last 2 games in particular, it's like it's so predictable that there's no pressure, and the quarterback could seem like he could do whatever he wants. So is it disguising? What would you like to see him do in terms of how he could help these guys?
Well, I think first and foremost, you gotta bring more pressure. You've got to manufacture it if you have to use the different blitz schemes, and you got to play more man. But this is the NFL, and week one, everyone looks great, and as teams start to study and teams start to kind of change and morph into a different offense each week, you've got to do the same as a defense. You can never, when we played under Jim Johnson and McDermott and Spagnuolo, it was the same base type defense, but each week we had different coverages, we had different looks, we had different ideas and different ways to attack the offense. And that's what I feel is missing right now. Like, this team isn't, I guess I gotta put it this way, like the way it came across when Gannon first came in was he was going to be, an innovative type of defensive coordinator, come up with different schemes each week, use the players that he has in the best, put them in the best positions. But now it seems almost like where you're trying to play like the old school cover 2, or even, the Legion of Boom, where they just stayed in cover 3, but you don't have the horses for that, right? So now it's like, okay, we can't just sit in the zone all day. We can't just not add pressure. We can't just rely on our front 4 to stop the run. Okay, now let's use that brain. Let's get innovative. Let's bring different looks. Let's, odd looks, odd fronts, 4-man fronts, cover 1, cover 3, quarters coverage. I don't care what it is. It's something different to make the offense have to scheme you up instead of the other way around.
Q, do you see Fletcher Cox as a player who is struggling to adapt to a new scheme and new alignments, or a player who probably doesn't want to adapt to new scheme or new alignments?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it was tough because I really felt that in the beginning of the season that this scheme would fit him well. And I thought that he would take to it a lot easier. But again, it really is tough when your entire career you've been cut loose and able to just get after the quarterback. I kind of liken it a little bit to when Asante Samuel first came, because he was the type of player that in New England where it was a 3-4 cover 3, and you could take your chances when you wanted. And early on, I think he struggled playing within that scheme, and it wasn't until we as a secondary and as a defense in general just said, all right, man, the best thing you do is take the ball away, just do what you do, right? So I think that's a little bit of what's going on right now, in the sense that Fletch is probably not used to the scheme and playing gaps and taking double teams, and Hargrave really getting the singles right now and really taking off. And I'm not saying that he's looking, across at Hargrave like, hey, you're taking the plays I'm supposed to be taking. But it does get a little frustrating when you're used to playing a certain way and now you're just a guy in a gap. So hopefully that changes. Hopefully they allow both of those guys to just kind of do what they do best. That's get after the quarterback and not necessarily just take gaps and let those guys rock, man. This is what it's all about when you're adjusting your scheme to your players, is finding out what they do best and let them do it, right? And I don't think that, especially with the front, I don't think that we're doing that.
Was there ever a point, because you play with Jim Johnson and Spags, so I don't know if this happened, but wherever you played and whenever you played, was there ever a situation where you felt like you weren't used right, or the defense wasn't getting it? And then if it happened, did you guys do anything about it? Because I do worry, and there's a Marcus Hayes article out where Sirianni lit up the D coordinator behind the scenes. But if the defense continues to struggle, I mean, to give up over 40 points 2 weeks in a row is almost hard to believe. If this continues to happen, I would worry, Q, about, I don't want to say the players are going to turn on the defense coordinator, but there becomes a point where if they're not going to get it, this thing could get really ugly. Do you worry about this thing getting much worse?
Yeah, I do. In a city like Philadelphia, when you're playing like let's look at last week. We scored. Now the Chiefs is a tremendous offense, but when you score 30 points, you expect to have some shot in the game. And 2 weeks in a row over 40 points, and you can't stop anybody. It starts to wear on you, and especially in a city like Philadelphia, where it's everything's magnified. It starts to get frustrating, it starts to get tough, and guys start arguing with each other. They start arguing with the coaches, and it's something that I hope doesn't happen here. Hasn't really happened here before, but I think I agree 100% that it can end up in a bad situation where guys are just don't care anymore, and we never want to see that.
No.
What did you make of Jonathan Gannon not saying that he's not comfortable playing dime right now, and especially on the heels of Eric Wilson, the linebacker, having to get matched up a couple of times against Tyreek Hill unfavorably?
Yeah, so my question with that was, who would be the dime back, right? So it would be Zach McPherson, correct?
Or a third safety, it could be Zach McPherson. It could be Craig James, who's been on the team for a while. He's an extra corner on the practice squad who has played in the NFL. Or it could be Marcus Epps, who is a coverage safety.
Yeah, and I could see Epps in that position. To me, I think that that his statement says more that I don't think he believes in that fifth that fifth safety. I think that he believes that staying in nickel or those situations give them the best opportunity. I disagree. I think the way the NFL is right now, you have to be able to go with some dime. Obviously, nickel's a huge part of the game now, but you have to be able to cover and bring another guy with some speed and athleticism in the box to help out. I mean, just because a guy's little doesn't mean that he can't play the run. Doesn't mean that he can't get in the box and blitz. Doesn't mean that he can't show the opposing quarterback a different look. I mean, listen, if I'm a quarterback and I see dime, okay, now I'm thinking, okay, he could possibly blitz right here. He could play zone right here. If he's good against the run, I mean, you could put Rodney at dime. I mean, sure, he would be fine with that, right? But now if I'm in the game and I see a nickel and I see a linebacker, the matchup is easy. I know what I'm looking at. So, again, it's one of those things where in this day's game, you can't be so rigid, especially when you're not really doing anything anyway, right? You're giving up 40 points a game, teams are running up and down the field on you. Why not take a chance and see, right? And at least okay, well, that's why it didn't work. And so I disagree with that rigidness of we don't have that guy here because we don't know. Like, do you know as a coach if you have that guy if you never give him the opportunity?
Q, watching the last 2 weeks, we talk about things they should do, but for what they've done, is it on the zone? Are they carrying the guy, the receiver or the tight end to the right depth? What are the sort of the technical issues that they're having? Because it's really unreal. Last week, Tyreek Hill seemed to get anything he wanted in breaking routes. So we're trying to figure out, what is the problem? Why can't they cover guys?
I think it's the most simplest and craziest answers I'll ever give you.
All right.
And this all comes down to the eyes. It all comes down to reading your keys and knowing where you're supposed to be in your zone. On the play, I forget what play it was. I think it might have been Tyreek's first touchdown. The Eagles were in the zone, and I believe it was a play action. I could be wrong, but it happened time and time again. But it was a play action. Linebacker stepped up. Safety's eyes are in the backfield, not looking at their keys, and he slips right behind you, right? So if you if you look at an offense like the Rams offense is a perfect example of the type of offense where you have to have your eyes in the right spots. You have to read your keys because they do a lot of zone run, and they slip guys behind you all day. I mean, I watched the game last night, and I'm seeing Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods sliding behind linebackers all day because they're so worried about the run, right? And they're not reading their keys. They're just looking at the running back and the quarterback and getting downhill, and those guys get right behind you. And it's the same thing with the Eagles secondary and the Eagles linebacking core, where and it starts to happen a lot when teams are running the ball up and down the field on you. So these guys got to get their eyes in the right spots, read your keys. If you're a will linebacker, for instance, and you have to read that guard, and if the guard pulls, you got to go, right? But if I'm a safety and my job is to play cover 2, and I think it's run, but this receiver's running straight up the field, I got to read my keys, and I got to trust that the front 7 is going to take care of the run because I got a threat right here. So I just think it's more disciplined things where the guys need to have their eyes in the right spots, and you guys need to read their keys a little bit better.
Q, we think about last year. I mean, Jim Johnson played a lot of man-to-man defense. He played a lot of one safety looks, and the Eagles got beat over the top quite a bit. And not just last year, but the year before and the year before.
Jim Schwartz.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Jim Schwartz. What did I say?
Jim Johnson.
Jim Johnson, my fault. Jim Schwartz.
Oops.
It just goes to show defense is pretty hard. They're pretty much taking a different philosophy here, which you said you understand the philosophy. Too deep, limit the explosive plays, but obviously same results, different application. You're not getting beat over the top, but you're giving it all up underneath. It just goes to show defense is pretty hard, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not easy. Everybody thinks it's so just tackle the guy. Like, what do you mean? Like, just cover him. Like, no, it's way more going on, and especially in today's game, because I feel, I was kind of in the era where it was starting to change a little bit, but I mean, gosh, these guys now, you can barely even touch them downfield, and
right.
The tight ends are big and fast. It's a tough game now, but those guys get paid, so you got to do what you got to do.
Is
yes,
it?
They do.
Just one thing: is it too much? Or is Gannon giving Q? Is he giving the guys too much to do? Like mentally too much too soon? Should he spoon fed it, and then once they start getting this, he'll give him more? Is it? Because it just seems to me like they're making so many mistakes. Is it too much?
I think it's actually the opposite. I think he did too little too early.
Okay.
This is the same. It's been the same scheme since training camp. I mean, you think about they get to start with a new coaching staff. You get to start a little bit earlier, right? So you get a little bit extra time. So you would think that by now there would be a little bit more variety in the scheme. You would have had the opportunity to look at your players and figure out who can play what, who can do what, who can, cover man if I put them in the zero blitz, who can cover in the cover 3. Like, you would think that all those things would have been worked out by the end of the preseason, and it just seems like it has not. And it seems like, just a little bit unprepared for, a 17-game season where you're going to have different looks. And listen, this very well could be not. I hate going back to this, but I do feel like even though Jim Johnson was the mastermind in this defense, I feel like he had Spagnuolo. At times we had Ron Rivera. We had, Sean McDermott. We've had Harbaugh, like all guys that ended up being head coaches eventually. And I think it was a collaborative effort where you had ideas coming from a bunch of different peoples. And it seems like to me, and I don't know for a fact, but with this coaching staff so young, maybe they don't know how to adjust. Maybe they don't know what's the best defense to put these guys in because they don't have all that experience yet. I think Denard Wilson's a very good young coach, the secondary coach, but he's played predominantly in the cover 2 scheme. And so I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I do feel like there's an element of that where there's not enough experience in that coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball to be able to figure out how to get things better.
And that's what the Eagles need to do, figure out how to get it better. If you're looking to buy or trade in a vehicle, visit our friends at Sky Motor Cars out in Westchester, PA. Go to skymotorcars.com. You'll get the best deal, and you can tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. Q, we thank you so much. That was a great breakdown of what's going on, of the breakdowns on the Eagles defense. And I think we all look forward to seeing what they do Sunday against the Panthers that might be different than what we've seen in the last 2 weeks. Have a great one.
Pray for it.
Definitely.
Thanks, guys.
And of course, you can catch Q's views on our Sunday pregame show from 10 to 12 on the Inside the Birds platform. Have a good one, everybody. You've been watching Inside the Birds TV.